And that's where, as a coach, you cringe when athletes do that, because like, great, you bought all that bike to make you faster. You know, you got your race wheels, you got your aero helmet if you're in trial, you got all this aero equipment, but you don't know how to train. And that's where you'll see the biggest gains is in the training, not in the equipment.
Hey, fitness friends, welcome back to the Future of Fitness podcast and interview series. This is your host, Eric Malzone, and this is episode number 116. I am coming to you from our Whitefish, Montana studios, aka my home office. And I get to talk to Kevin Dessart. He is from USA Cycling. He is the Director of Coaching Education and Athlete Development. And I had a really great time talking to him. I think, from a personal standpoint, our values align as far as, lifestyle always comes first. And it was also very educational about the world of cycling. I haven't dove too much into the world of cycling. He was actually referred to me as a guest by Menachem out of Tel Aviv. So thank you for that connection, Menachem. And it was, just interesting overall. See where the sport is going, how they're training people, how they're developing athletes from a young age, and how they're identifying talent. I think there's a lot of lessons for all sports to learn from how they're doing things there. And then it was really interesting to me to talk about the relationship of how the sport develops and how safety and accessibility on our urban and suburban roads reflects on how the sport is doing. And it makes total sense, right? If people are going to get out on a bike and train and be part of USA Cycling or be part of that feeder program, they have to feel safe, right? They have to be on the roads and they have to feel safe. And that was an interesting point of conversation. I didn't see it coming, but I think you'll see I tried to represent a couple points of views when we talked about it, and it was really interesting convo. So also, before I get into the interview here, I am excited to say that this episode is brought to you by Certified Course Creation. So if you have an expertise, you have a specific silo of knowledge that you need to get out there and you're wanting to stop trading your time for money, go to certifiedcoursecreation.com, and their expert team will help you pull out that concept, right, with a free discovery call, and then start to build curriculum behind it. Annotate it with scientific writers, build exams, sales funnels, email, launch series, you name it, everything to build a very highly lucrative online certification program. And let's be honest, if there is one area, one industry that I believe is ripe for disruption, I think it's education. Everything's moving online. So this is a great time to, put all those years of work you put in the trenches, right, as a fitness and health professional, when you've been nailing down your expertise, time to get it out there, put your flag in the ground, and make yourself an expert. Identify yourself as an expert that you already are. So certifiedcoursecreation.com, go check it out. Without further ado, this is episode number 116 with Kevin Dessart of USA Cycling. Enjoy the show. Kevin, we're live. Welcome to the Future of Fitness, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And like all great podcasts start, I have to mention that we had a great conversation right before this that I was not recording and that people will never hear. But hopefully we can...
we can recreate that.
Yeah, hopefully we can recreate it a little bit better. Kevin, let's do this, man, before we get into some pretty cool topics about USA Cycling, your background in coaching, how much coaches don't know and that they need to admit, and what it's like to, have people perform when they need to, not just, in the practice realm, right? Give us your background. What do you do? Give us a little bit of your story.
Okay, so I'm the Director of Coaching Education and Athlete Development with USA Cycling. I've been here now coming up on 7 years. Prior to that, I worked with a coaching company here in Colorado Springs for almost 10 years. Prior to that, I worked in the NHL for 11 years. And that was like my first job out of school. I worked for the New York Islanders and worked my way through with 3 different teams in the NHL. And then we got to the point where I've been in Colorado now 17 years. Everybody asks, did you move for a job? Or no, I moved. This is where I want to live. It was a lifestyle choice. And I'm like, with the area and what we have in Colorado Springs, as far as national governing bodies and a lot of other amateur sports entities, I'm like, we can move out there. I can get a job out there. So we did back in 2001, I guess it was. So almost 18 years. So been here and it's been a blast. It's great to live.
Yeah, I've heard amazing thing about Colorado Springs. I've actually never been there, but when I imagine it, I just imagine like these amazing athletes walking everywhere, because it's like, it seems like such a hub of performance and athleticism and outdoorsmen's,
Yeah, and to give you a little example of that, and this isn't to make this about my athletic background because it's nothing to speak of, but when I was born and raised on the East Coast in New York and started racing triathlons in college. And I go to a race. Eventually got to the point where in New York on Long Island, I could pretty much go to a race and compete for the win or top 5. I showed up to Colorado Springs in my first race and I looked around. I had to bargain my way into the elite wave. And I got to the start of the race and I'm looking at guys on the beach and I'm just kind of like, that's Hunter Kemper. That's Mike Smedley. That's so-and-so. That's so-and-so. I remember turning around, looking at my wife, and I'm like, what the? Oh, this is going to be interesting. These are all guys that were Olympians and professional triathletes that are just in a local race. So there is a lot of that around. There's a lot of world-class athletes in the area, but not as many as in Boulder. I'll say that. Boulder is the mecca for it, but it's pretty. It can be pretty intimidating.
Sure.
I'll say that.
Yeah. It's interesting. So we left California about 2 years ago because, we wanted a different lifestyle. So, now I'm in Whitefish, Montana. And, it's so, for people who are really lifestyle focused, it sounds like you and I are, like, that's my number one value, right? Really. It's like, I want, a great lifestyle. I want to have the things around me that I want to access. I want to access them when I want them. But just seeing like up here, it's a different breed of person too, like everyone was born on skis, right? Apparently. And, like resort skiing is like boring here. It's like, well, why would I ever ski the resort unless it's like, 16 inches of powder and, but they're all just, God, they're just incredible physical specimens here. They were just bred that way.
Yeah.
And, I'd imagine like I said, I've never been to Colorado Springs. I have good friends in Boulder who are amazing athletes, extremely outdoor. And I think it's just, those communities tend to thrive in areas like that. Yeah.
They do, for sure.
So tell us about what you do at USA Cycling a little bit more.
So my role on the coaching education side is that we have about 1,600 licensed coaches. I'm responsible for licensing them, the curriculum that they have to study, the curriculum that they have to use for continuing education, putting on all of our coach clinics, our coach summit, anything that has to do with making a coach a better cycling coach from a USA Cycling perspective falls under me. Then on the athlete development side of things, I'm also responsible for kind of the entry way for young athletes into our pipeline. So I manage about a dozen talent ID camps every summer all over the U.S., which brings in 14 to 19-year-old athletes. We put them through a week of skills and drills and training, all in an effort to A, become better cyclists, B, kind of just recognize where the athlete is at. And a lot of people, excuse me, hear talent ID and they think they have to be the best of the best at that age. And that's not how I view talent ID. Talent ID is like looking at an athlete, because again, at that age, there can be so much disparity. So you might have a young 14 or 15-year-old boy or girl who can't compete with a 16 or 17-year-old boy or girl, or another 14 or 15-year-old boy or girl who may have matured earlier than they did. But it's kind of keeping an eye on those athletes and seeing just where they are currently, and then following their progress throughout their cycle. Are they going to continue to ride? Are they going to continue to race? Are they going to go back to camp so we can see them next year? So we can kind of just track the progress and then see if we get them in the pipeline, do we afford them other opportunities to go to like a European camp or do some racing domestically for us? But just kind of provide that entryway. And then also on the athlete development side, we have a new program here called our Olympic Development Program, specifically on the track. I oversee that program. And again, that's for 14 and 19-year-old track sprinters. Track athletes, both sprinters and endurance athletes, where these are athletes that do come to a camp specifically to be selected to be part of the ODP development team. We have, I think, 18 athletes on that team right now, 9 sprint and 9 endurance athletes. We periodically bring them to camps. We bring them to different race opportunities. We have a whole new race series this year that they're going to be included in, all with the goal of, at this point, again, they're young athletes. We're not so concerned with results right now, but the goal is to create those athletes into our future Olympians. So, 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now, they're racing for us on an international level at World Championships, Olympic Games, but kind of providing a more defined path on the track side for these athletes. So it accomplishes a fair amount of variety. But what's nice is that because I've got coaching education and athlete development tied together, I can almost identify coaches who might be good fits for different positions as we move along. Because, some coaches come and go. When we have new programs, we obviously have to staff them properly. But it gives me an opportunity when I meet coaches and I work with them, just to kind of get to know them, what they're all about. Would this coach be a good fit to work in this program? Would this coach be a good fit to maybe take a team to Ireland or somewhere else in Europe? So it's kind of a nice, a little bit of cohesion there, if you will, kind of taking it, not just having athletes develop in a pipeline, but giving coaches opportunities, because I am dealing with a lot of coaches on a day-to-day basis. So it's kind of a nice, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but a nice blend or mixture, both on the coaching, education, and athlete development side.
Yeah. Interesting. And, something that caught my attention, all of that it sounds like a really fun job.
There are worse ways to make a living.
Yeah. It sounds really cool. Especially it sounds like you've been an athlete your whole life. So to be able to kind of, within that environment.
I'll admit it. I'm pretty proud of being that I have been an athlete my whole life, but I went to school for this. I have athletic administration major from St. John's University. So it's kind of like, I know a lot of people that have gone to school and never used their major before, not happy in their job. And something, they may make a lot more money than me, but I would argue happiness and lifestyle. I'm pretty fortunate, and I don't take that for granted at all. So yeah, it's like, there are definitely worse ways to make a living.
Yeah. Well, you look happy, healthy, and you even got a little bit of a tan. So,
well, truth be told, I might still have a little bit of tan left. New Year's, we spent a week in Hawaii. Then I flew right from Hawaii to a coaching clinic in Phoenix. So I spent the first 2 weeks of the new year in some nice weather and was outside every day, almost all day. So
awesome. Good for you, man. So talent identification.
Yes.
That sounds like an art within itself, and here's what ran through my head, right? Yep. It's like, I was thinking about, I've been in, my background was essentially in aquatics. So swimming and water polo at a very early age. Yep. Most of my friends that I grew up with, I'm really good friends with still. A lot of them were great athletes at a specific age, right? And then they kind of got in high school, everything kind of fizzled out. I got into, very
high school.
Yeah. And then I got into water polo. I had a pretty successful career for a while. No one would have saw that coming. I was a chubby kid, right? 6th, 7th grade. And I can think of a couple of examples of people who, you wouldn't have seen it coming. Right. Unless maybe you had an eye for it.
Well, yeah. And part of that, Eric, is, I guess you could call it an art. I just like to think it's using common sense. Just because
that's an art nowadays.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But if you look at like the whole American development model.
Okay.
Different athletes mature at different ages. We're not machines. We're not robots. So like I said earlier, you could take a 16-year-old boy who has gone through puberty. He's matured. He looks like a grown man. Then you have a 16-year-old boy who hasn't. Maybe the chubby kid, he hasn't lost the baby fat, but is keeping an eye on both of those athletes and seeing, because let's put it this way, the younger athlete, the less mature athlete hasn't developed yet, but what's his mind like? Does he have the mind of a fighter that he's going to work really hard, even to, and then you've got the mature 16-year-old who may find racing comes very easy because he's matured early. So it's that whole biological age, not actual age, that you have to look at. And it's one of those things where a big part of like our talent ID camps isn't just watching the athlete, isn't just seeing their power numbers and seeing how well they ride. It's getting to know them. That's why I encourage athletes to come to these camps, because you get to work with our coaches for a week. We get to know you. So a lot of it's about personality, because you could have kids that are lazy that, I'd rather take a less skilled kid that works his rear end off than a super skilled kid that's lazy, because those less skilled kids are eventually going to catch up. And now the lazy athlete doesn't know how to work, or may not know how to work, or, flip that switch.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where you've got to kind of get to know the athlete. There's, like I say, numbers can tell you one thing. A lot of people say numbers don't lie, and they don't, but they don't tell the whole truth. So that's where you've got to we put kids through power tests. You got to kind of look at those numbers and see where they are, but also understand there is so many different variables in that, again, with their biological age. So it's kind of, you're trying to figure out and like look into your crystal ball where the athlete is going to be in 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at that. That's kind of fun. That's kind of, because I'm always I love the underdog that back him in the corner just comes out fighting and scrapping. This kid's not going to stop until he gets what he needs and gets what he wants. So it's fun to watch that, but it can be challenging, and you make some good choices and you make some not so good choices. But, again, nobody has that crystal ball to say this athlete is going to be, and that's one thing we always tell our athletes at these camps. You have a lot of kids that'll come and say, oh, I'm a sprinter, or I'm a climber. And it's like, no, you're not. You're a cyclist. Don't pigeonhole yourself into one thing, because at that age, they're going to change so much over the next 5-8 years that their body style may change. And you may have somebody who thought he was a climber. Now, all of a sudden, he puts on a lot of muscle mass. That's just his natural body. If that's carrying that muscle mass up a climb, you may not be a climber anymore. So it's kind of, don't tell the athlete not to pigeonhole themselves into one category. And the other thing we try and talk to them is, don't just be cyclists, be athletes, and do other sports, because there's so many things that just the athleticism carries over on the bike, and vice versa. What you do on a bike can carry over to other sports. So it is a little bit of an art, but I just look at it as trying to make good, educated decisions, basically, on athletes, and not pigeonholing us into, oh, he's that kind of athlete or that kind of athlete. Being open-minded towards it all.
Yeah, it's great. It reminds me, I use this quote like probably 5 times a week, but I had a swim coach when I was younger, Norm Havercroft, and he's like, Eric, there's swimmers, and then there's athletes that swim.
Right.
And ultimately, I know which side I want to be on. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's a big differentiator for people at that age, because that hit me at a very, I was like 10. I was like, oh, wow. I didn't really understand it probably until I was like 14, but it made a lot of sense.
That's good you understood it at 14, because a lot of athletes still don't understand at that age.
Yeah. Maybe 14, 32. I don't know. Somewhere around there. Yeah. How is the state of cycling? I mean, obviously, the press, with, the big name man, a lot of issues that happen with cycling. How is the state of cycling both in the U.S. and globally? I like to think we're turning the page a little bit on that. It's been a while now since all that took place. We were affected by it as a governing body. Our numbers went down. The entire cycling industry numbers went down. But I think we've kind of, by the looks of it, we've kind of put a stop to the decline. Mm-hmm. So we've kind of, I think, reached the bottom. And there are things like gravel racing and Gran Fondos that are bringing the sport back up, where more people are riding and racing or participating in races.
So it has rebound. I think it's on the rebound now, which is nice to see. The biggest issue right now is road cycling. The numbers aren't what they used to be, and that's a hard one. And whether that's because of the popularity of Gran Fondo, which is on the road, but gravel type races and cyclocross races and mountain bike races, those are all growing. I think that's part of just the road side is the toughest side, and I think part of that too is with all the social media. You can't go a week without seeing somebody that was hit by a car on the road, and it gets scary out there for people, and it comes to the point where for some people they don't want to ride on the road anymore. Now, whether they switch to a different discipline or they stop riding altogether, that I don't have numbers on that. But I think the state of cycling here is getting better in the U.S. It's growing. Over in Europe, it's a different story. I don't know if there's been a decline in Europe.
Sure.
Cycling in Europe is more of a mainstream sport, if you will. We've got our top four here in the U.S. and over there, obviously, over in Europe, they do have, football, soccer is huge, but there's a lot of other sports. Cycling does really well in Europe. Look, that's where all the Grand Tours are over there. They do really well. All a local Kermesse in Belgium can get a couple hundred athletes showing up to it, which is the local weekday race. And these are not your athletes that are just participating. These are athletes that have a very good shot at, making their way through the ranks and going and being picked up by pro teams along the line. So the state of cycling is, I think, going to start growing again in the U.S. But over in Europe, I think it's pretty solid.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I wonder too, if I'm listening to this and I'm a cycling enthusiast, right? And I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could be a cycling coach, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, I mean, I presume it's an affluent sport, right? Because
can be, yeah.
I mean, it's not, I don't know, like I'm not a cyclist, but my wife is a downhill mountain biker. Her bike is like $8,000, and that's like moderate pricing, right? Plus all the other stuff, like she has body armor, and plus all that other stuff. It becomes, it adds up quickly in large chunks. And I presume that too. The people who are getting into the sport of cycling, there has to be either some kind of sponsorship or they come from affluency. And so as a coach, it seems like, kind of a good option, to get into a sport where, obviously there's some money in it. And, how does one get into it? Like what would be the first steps to be a cycling coach?
Well, typically most of our coaches are former racers and they have a passion for it. And they've raced for a while and they want to give back to the sport. They see an opportunity to maybe make some money off of it by coaching, because there are so many nuances to cycling that athletes can learn. But if you have a coach, that learning curve is much shorter. So it makes it easier for athletes to move up the ranks, to get better, faster. But we also, here's the thing is, as far as coaches, and when we do our clinics, we talk to coaches a lot about the business of coaching. You ever watch, I can think of the name of it now, the TV show where the people are looking for money?
Shark Tank.
Shark Tank, thank you. Yes,
yeah.
Watch Shark Tank.
Yeah.
When you have somebody that they may not know their numbers great, and all of a sudden they come up with, yes, but I have such a passion for it.
Yeah.
And the camera usually goes to Mark Cuban, who just does one of this.
Yeah. I love that show. Yep.
I start with the passion is great. And I love Mark Cuban's response to that, because passion will get you so far. If you're not paying your bills and you're trying to be a cycling coach, that passion is going to, after a year or two, and you're like struggling financially, is going to weigh on you, and that passion goes away. You're like, well, I can't do that. I love this, but I just can't do it anymore. And we lose coaches because they come in and they don't have that business concept that there is. If you're going to be a cycling coach, you have to be prepared. If you want to do it and do it properly and make a living off of it, You have to have more than just passion. You have to have some business acumen and be able to run a small business, unless you can grow to a big business, which is great. And some coaches have done that. But it's always one of those things where that's how they start. And I always caution coaches, you have to be prepared for this. This is not just a passion-driven. It'd be great if it was, because while there is some money in cycling and yes, bikes can be super expensive, but you can also get much better deals on bikes as an entry-level athlete. Typically, you're going to move your bike up, and I could create the argument that $1,000 bike can sometimes be just as good, if not better, than a $8,000 to $10,000 bike, especially if you're just starting. But it's just being prepared that as a coach, there are opportunities for you out there, and you can make a living out of it. But you just have to be prepared to. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. The one thing I was saying, go with the price, is that even though it's more of an affluent sport, if you will, people don't always see the value in wanting to pay a coach.
Yeah,
they'll spend $8,000-$10,000 on a bike, but spending $250 a month for coaching, so they know how to race that bike and ride that bike a little better, they're sometimes not as open to doing that. So it's kind of, and that's where, as a coach, you cringe when athletes do that, because like, great, you bought all that bike to make you faster. You know, you got your race wheels, you got your aero helmet if you're in trial, you've got all this aero equipment, but you don't know how to train. And that's where you'll see the biggest gains is in the training, not in the equipment. But so to go back to your initial question, coaches typically start as racers. They go in, if they want their license, they come through us. We offer continuing education for them. So we're always trying to make them better coaches. And not only better coaches as how do I train the athlete, but how do I run my business? How do I deal with everything else that is not training? You know, how do I teach somebody skills? What do I do if they've got, you know, if they may need some sports psychology, they may need some nutrition work, and try and teach coaches all the different avenues they can go down to help those athletes.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I in we have an online community called the Fitness Accelerator, and we have two people in there. One, his name is Ken Andruko. He was on the Canadian national team back in the day, right? And then we have Menachem Brody, who so kind of like this old school and new school. And it was a funny conversation that I kind of caught on to them having about. Ken was like, back in his day, it was just, just get on your bike and ride, right? And now, Menachem's like this new wave of coach focusing on strength, technique, the technology behind it, AI, like all this stuff. And I'm curious, how have you, in your experience within the industry, how has the cycling coaching profession changed in the training?
Well, I'm sure you've seen the photos of old Tour de France riders who have bottles of beer or wine and cigarettes while they're smoking.
Yeah.
Because the theory was it could thin your blood flow is easier, and then, smoking opens up your lungs. Well, so long story short, not exactly true. But was it Ken you were saying is just get on your bike and ride?
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that. And that's where it's, at its basic level, it's all about stress. But that said, there are so many other things, like what Menachem does with mobility and strength is huge, because that gets athletes prepared, can get the most out of them, can help keep them injury free. So there's so much more that we've learned over the years that now takes place. So when you look at what Ken and Menachem are doing, they might be, I don't know if I want to say they're on two ends of the spectrum, but there's justification for both sides of it and meshing that together. Because there are times, yes, you have to be specific with your athlete's workouts, but at the same point, if an athlete, let's say you prescribe a 10-minute steady state interval, does your body know if you went 10 minutes and 30 seconds? And some coaches will get some athletes will get stressed out that, I only went 9.5 minutes. Well, yeah, that 30 seconds is that, okay, that's okay. The body doesn't know what the prescribed workout was. As long as we know what the goal of the workout is, it's kind of that, just get on your bike and ride, but let's keep the parameters within this level. And, there are some coaches that would argue with me, no, it's got to be black and white. But I'll make the argument coaching is never black and white and should never be black and white. So there is that, because there are times you just have to tell an athlete, just ride your bike, just go hard. And if you don't understand ask me what the workout is. And if it's supposed to be hard, make your hard stuff hard, make your easy stuff easy. But I do love what Menachem is doing as well, because everything has to evolve. And and Menachem is part of that evolution of cycling, where it's going, what athletes should be doing. And that's why there are sports psychologists out there. That's why there's nutritionists out there. That's why there's, the strength and conditioning people out there. And that's when I don't know whether this was while we were recording or before, that coaches need to have that team available to them. Mm-hmm. Because I know me as a coach, I don't know it all. I know the basics of nutrition, but if I have an athlete that really needs something, I know where I'm going to send them. If I have an athlete that needs a sports psychologist, I might be able to talk them, to a certain point, but that's not my specialty. I'm going to refer him to a sports psychologist. So it's that evolution and bringing all those pieces together to make the athletes better.
Yeah. I feel that a lot of the things that we understand nowadays about energy system training has come from cycling. Cycling, endurance sports, all of those, and we've adapted them. I mean, even like the education I got as a CrossFit coach through James Fitzgerald and OPEX, who are actually in the next episode of this show. A lot of it came from studying, those sports. And I'm curious to see what kind of technology you guys are looking at now. I mean, heart rate was always a great thing for cycling. It's hard to adapt to many other sports, but are you guys looking at HRV? Are you looking at what else are you guys looking at right now?
The biggest thing right now is power, using power meters on the bike. So those numbers don't lie. There's no lag. There's no like heart rate can have a lag, but the thing is power and your power to weight ratio. That can tell a lot about an athlete. I know there are a lot of coaches using AI right now. I haven't gone down that path. I've listened to some speak. I'm not that knowledgeable in it yet. But I always go back to the power meters that are out there. And there's also Leomo has this motion-based technology trying to get proper alignment on the bike with all different trigger points. I don't know if they call them trigger points or different points on the body that you can analyze the pedal stroke and see if you're losing power in different places, if you've got a discrepancy someplace, and how do we make changes for the athlete according to using some of this new technology? The biggest thing, Eric, for me right now is there's a lot of technology out there that it's almost, I don't know if overwhelming is the right word, but sometimes coaches almost rely too much on it. They don't use it as tools. They use it rather in place of, what's between their two ears. And having conversations with the athletes and talking to the athletes to find out what's going wrong. Because like I said earlier, numbers and statistics don't lie, but they don't always tell the whole truth.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing, is that if the coaches aren't communicating and talking with the athletes to find out what's going on, all this technology is great, but if you're just using that and not talking to the athletes, you're missing the boat. You're missing a huge part of what's actually going on with the athlete.
Yeah. It's really interesting point about technology and where it's going. And I think HRV is probably the best example because, and this could go for an athlete. It could go for you, me, someone who's just, a weekend warrior or someone who just has a stressful job. Right. And, you could go up to someone and be like, hey, how you feeling? I'm feeling good. Yeah, I feel all right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, your HRV tells me that you feel like shit, that you're stressed out. And they'll be like, what? And then they get anxious and then they hold back from things that they could be doing, or they make them happy or what it is. So it's an interesting thing, that time that we're walking into, because we're going to have so much, biofeedback on what we're doing. Right.
Yeah.
Everything. And, we can't let it dictate Because we have an amazing ability. There might be some nights that I or you get 4 hours of sleep, right? But we can override it simply by saying, you know what, I feel great. I'm not tired.
Or override it with a little bit of caffeine.
Yeah, or a little bit of caffeine.
Yeah.
I'm just changing your mood, changing your physiology just through your mood, right? Yep. So I hope, people don't become too dependent on it. But I could see, a lot of that, because I talk about a lot of technology on here. I know some of the AI projects that are being done, in the endurance space, in cycling. It's really fascinating. I'm curious too, because we mentioned like United States versus Europe, right? How are we at like an Olympic level? And maybe you can give insights into other sports. How are we developing athletes here versus how athletes are getting developed in other countries, Eastern Bloc, Europe?
Us specifically, we're holding majority of our camps for those athletes that are going to be at that level. They're racing in Europe. We bring them to Europe to race to get, and that's part of the biggest. I don't want to say the biggest issue we have, but it goes back to me the best and worst thing that's happened in coaching in the last 20 years is internet-based coaching. Because a lot of coaches, some of them think that sitting here typing is coaching because they're writing the workouts. But you're missing the whole skill side of it. What's your athlete doing racing? Can they anticipate things? And what we always hear is that we send our athletes over to Europe to race, and boy, they're strong. They've got big engines, but they don't have the skill. They don't have the race smarts yet. So it's kind of like we're playing catch up to a lot of European countries at a younger age. And, when some of those athletes, European athletes, have been riding bikes since they were little kids every single day, and just inherently, because of some of the things they were doing, the skills they were learning, and they start racing, they're more advanced in those areas than our athletes are. That said, that is why we have the majority of our programs, our road programs, and a lot of mountain bike and cross are over in Europe. We do a lot of racing, a lot of camps in Europe specifically for that. So we get our athletes. It's in Europe. It's more acceptable to be on a bike. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but like I was in Utrecht, Netherlands, a couple of years ago, and the number of bikes to cars was probably 15 to 20 to 1.
Wow.
And it was incredible, where they have their roads in this one area, at least, that the infrastructure is more geared towards cycling than it was cars. And watching the people just riding their townie bikes, on crowded bike paths where you've got whether it be the guy riding a townie bike and he's got a girl on a back saddle, sitting side saddle, and he's track standing at a stoplight. It's things like that, those skills that are inherent. We don't have that here. Unfortunately, it's not as acceptable. Cars aren't, or people aren't as accepting of cyclists on the road, if you will, here in the U.S. So it's kind of, it makes it a challenge, which is why we do have it over in Europe. That said, on the international stage, we still do pretty well when it comes to world championships and Olympic games. So we've got a lot of quality. We have a lot of good coaches here that are running our programs that have spent a lot of time in Europe or from Europe, and they understand the demands of it. So it's we're not far behind a lot of them, but you've got countries like Great Britain, Australia, who I would say are a little bit ahead of us, and that a lot of that has to do with numbers and funding as well. So, yeah. But we hold our own, and we've got high aspirations for the Olympic Games.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. It's really interesting. You brought up the cultural factor, right? Of how cycling can be intertwined in culture. I spent my 20s in San Francisco, and there's a good amount of cyclists, and this was like the clash between motorists and cyclists, right? It's something, Like it's pretty it's pretty strong. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with this thing, but they have this thing in San Francisco called critical mass. So I think it's like they pick one Friday out of the month. I believe it's the last Friday of every month. And all cyclists will, I don't know how they do it. Is it like a mass email or something like that? But they pick one major thoroughway in the city, and they'll go on a Friday afternoon and they'll all bike down this thoroughway. So they'll freeze traffic, right, for an afternoon.
Right.
And I don't think they're making any friends by doing that. But I've seen I have like in person seen someone take a bike and throw it at another person's windshield because that person was trying to push their way through traffic. And I'm like, well, God, this person probably has to get home. It's Friday afternoon. And I'm not saying either one, like there's a-holes on both sides of this.
Oh, yeah.
Any percentage of population, right? 1 out of 100 is going to be a jerk. But man, that culture clash is that anywhere else besides the United States?
I mean, I can only speak of the places that I've been. Yeah. And I've seen it much more accepting. And I've been to Germany, I've been in the Netherlands, I've been to Austria. In those countries, it's more acceptable. Yeah. It's getting around on your bike is more of a way of life than it is here. It's not the norm here, where it may not necessarily be the norm in all those countries, but it's more acceptable in those countries. It's people ride bikes, and that's just okay. And there's a respect for it. And that's the thing that, when we're teaching coaches and talking to cyclists, everything we do with skills is all about safety. And teaching your athletes to be good stewards out on the road means, stopping at stop signs, red lights, not being a dick when you're out on the road. Yeah. You have to be assertive to be safe, but you also can't be aggressive. And that's where I think a lot of people lose that. The difference between being assertive and aggressive. And if you're not making friends with cars on the road, and this is what I always tell athletes, is that, okay, if there's an accident, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. You're going to lose because you're on a bike. It's a bike against a 3,000-pound vehicle. I don't care whether you had the right of way or not. You're going to end up in a heap of trouble if you get hit. And you want to do everything to avoid it. And, and I've heard from athletes, well, I can do this because I'm allowed. Well, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. I mean, and I think some people have problem understanding that. Like I say, you may have the right of way. Okay. You want to take it, you better know what that car is going to do. Yeah. But it's kind of being, you want to be that defensive cyclist, if you will, kind of like a defensive driver, but still communicating with the people in cars so they know what you're going to do, so you're predictable. And that's, it's kind of very, I think it's quite different in Europe. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it reminds me of a time when I was living in Santa Barbara, California I lived there for about almost 10 years. And there was always, cycling is pretty popular there. Especially the weekend.
Great place to ride.
Yeah, it's a great place to ride. I mean, it's beautiful back roads, but there's so many times when I would see, a group of cyclists riding, 4 stacks side to side to side. And, I would just kind of patiently wait. And I was like, God, I'm starting to get annoyed now. They saw me. But I feel like, that's like, unfortunately, that's like the ones that people remember. No one remembers the cool guy or girl, who's like, waves at you, says, waves by, right? It's
the one thing too is most people don't understand. Most people in cars don't understand what it's like to be on a bike. So they don't, and that's okay, because they're not used to it, and that's where abreast in traffic, okay, not smart. But riding 2 abreast should be the most you should ride in traffic. And that's actually safer on the road if you're riding 2 abreast, because that makes the group shorter, so the car has less to pass, which most cars don't understand that. They want us all single file. So let's say I've got 10 cyclists. If you take 10 cyclists and you ride them side by side, that's a much smaller area, a much smaller distance that the car has to pass than if you take 10 riders all in a row. you've got now twice as long, and usually there's more gaps if you're like that. So it's even more than twice as long. But people that are driving cars don't understand that. So it's kind of, when you're talking to coaches and athletes, making them understand that the person in the car might not be thinking like a cyclist, because they're not a cyclist. They don't, and you can't expect them to be thinking that way. They're just thinking, I've got to get around this group. And here's a perfect example and this happened to me years ago. I used to live in Florida. We used to do a group ride on the weekends. And this was a group ride of probably 50, 60 riders. And, Florida's pretty flat. So when you're in the peloton, you're moving along at, 35 miles an hour, easy. And when you're riding in roads that's the speed limit, you're going the speed limit. So I had to go to traffic school one year for a ticket I got for other reasons. The instructor was talking about cyclists, and she said something about how, I can't pass them sometimes they're going the speed limit. So I went, excuse me. Yeah. So if they're going the speed limit, why do you need to pass them? And she just kind of did didn't think about that. Like, if we're going the speed, because guess what? I'm one of those athletes in that group. And it's pretty scary when some of the cars try and pass us. We're going the speed limit, be a little patient. You don't have to always go faster than the speed limit. And she kind of looked at me. She was kind of like, yeah, you're right. If you're going the speed limit, I shouldn't have to pass you. So it was and my point being is that people in cars aren't thinking like that. They're thinking, the first thought is adversary almost. And it's a group of cyclists. They're taking up the road. And again, when you have a group of 50, 60 cyclists trying to ride side by side, and again, the roads we were riding on in Florida weren't heavily traveled roads. We pick routes that, with low traffic. But most people in cars aren't thinking like cyclists, and you can't expect them to. But it's making sure that as cyclists and athletes that you understand that they're not thinking like you. So, which is okay.
Yeah, what a great point. I mean, inevitably for the growth of the sport, you have to get more people on bikes, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And in order to do that, people have to feel safe to be on the bike, right? And, I think subconsciously, if I'm driving, I probably if I see a group of cyclists, my first thought is like, okay, I got to get around these people, right? But never really think and I'm always, because I do, I've done some cycling. I'm very, very basic, but I do road cycling every once in a while. And it's scary, right?
It can be scary. Yeah. It can be
very scary. And so I try to do it in a calm, manner when I do, but sometimes I wonder, do I even, you're right, do I even need to pass them? What's the speed limit here? Maybe I could just be cool going the speed limit for 5 minutes in my life, right? But we're in such a damn hurry all the time to get to where we're going. I think that's really, is there any cities in the United States? I was in Victoria, British Columbia, up on Vancouver Island, and they've really gone a long way of making that a bicycle friendly city. Is there any cities within the United States that you think we could emulate for that type of
I mean, there's a number that have become more bike friendly, like Seattle is. I haven't spent a lot of time in Seattle, but it's supposedly a lot more bike friendly because a lot of people do bike. Boulder is one that is super bike friendly. Trying to think, Idaho, Boise, Idaho is supposedly, that's where the Idaho stop comes from, where it's actually in the state of Idaho. It's legal to treat a stop sign as a yield sign, and that's another area that people don't understand. Cyclists, depending upon what's happening at an intersection, it's sometimes better for them to treat a stop sign as a yield sign. It's actually safer. And it keeps traffic flowing faster, because stopping and starting on a bike is a lot slower than stopping and starting in a car.
Sure.
But then again, people just see cyclists that will roll through stop signs and they think the guy or gal is being a jerk. They're not obeying the law. But again, it's a safety thing where, you have to weigh what's going on there and not blowing right through it, treating it as a yield sign. But getting back to your other question, there are other areas. I'd have to go back, and I don't know of any others than those that have become. I mean, the Springs here, Colorado Springs, has become more bike friendly. A lot of cities are becoming more bike friendly because they're having the bike share options now, where you can just get on one of their county bikes and park it anywhere, and more bike lanes. But a lot of time, unfortunately, I think what happens, and this is just my opinion on city infrastructure, is that bike lanes and things like that are afterthoughts. After new communities are built, then it's, let's put in a bike lane, where that can sometimes do just the opposite. Like if you take, they have some roads here in the Springs that were, 2 and 2, so 4-lane road, where all of a sudden now it's a 2-lane road because one is a bike lane and it takes up the whole lane. So I'm not sure that's better, because now you're looking at, what have we just done to all the people in cars who I used to have 2 lanes now because there's a bike lane, and guess what? There's nobody in the bike lane. It's now 1 lane. So it's kind of one of the things, like, it's great to have the bike lanes, but it's also, what is that doing perception wise? A lot less cyclists here than drivers. So it's kind of, is it a catch-22? Damn, it's great to have them, but it's actually working against us. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
But there are some cities out there who've done some pretty good work. And then, like I say, I think Seattle's one, Boulder is another one, that have done, and Boise, Idaho, have done a pretty good job with their infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I'm in Montana is there's just too many damn people in most places, and I think that's ultimately kind of what we're facing here, is we just have we have a lot of human beings out there, especially in states like California, Colorado, Oregon. I'm partial to the West Coast because that's what I know, but East Coast is the same. So, moving forward, is there anything big coming down the pipe for USA Cycling? Anything we should be excited or aware of for you guys?
Yeah, well, we're coming into next year's Olympic year.
That's right.
So,
yes, love Olympic years.
Yeah, so do we. The coolest thing about this Olympic year is this, for the first time, I believe it's the first time ever, cycling is the only sport that will have a medal competition every single day of the Olympics.
Cool.
Because if you think about the games, swimming is typically a week, gymnastics is a week. But we have, over the however many 14, 15 days of the games, every single day there will be an Olympic medal handed out in cycling. And that's because of the new BMX disciplines. BMX came in the Olympic Games 2 Olympics ago. BMX racing came in. Now this year we have the urban BMX, which is more like trials, where they're think of your skate park. Think of X Games. You're doing tricks on the bike, all within a confined area. So we have very high aspirations for the Olympic Games this year, and we're looking to win 7 medals, which would be the highest we've won, except for LA Games, which were boycotted. So it should be interesting, and a lot of that has to do with the new BMX disciplines. Like this year in urban BMX, we won all 3 of the medals in the women's, and then we won gold in the men's. So if we can come close to duplicating that at the Olympic Games, that's 4 medals right there, just in one discipline. The last Olympic Games, we won gold in men's BMX racing, and what did Elise win? Elise won silver in women's BMX racing. And then we won time trial medals. So we've got some pretty high aspirations this year. Excuse me. So it should be a pretty good games for us. We're hoping it's a pretty good games for us.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, Kevin, where do people find out more about you? Is there a place they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, usacycling.org, and just go to the coaches section. That's where they can find anything on coaching education. Our talent ID camps are all under our events portion of our website. But if they want to reach out to me, definitely in the coaching section of the website, any, coaches at usacycling.org is the email that comes directly to me. So anybody can use that. But yeah, any questions or thoughts like that people have, send them my way.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, thanks for coming on, man. It's been a great learning experience for me. And I hope, we educated the fitness community a little bit more on the world of cycling, and maybe we piqued some people's interest too to get into coaching.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, my pleasure. Hey, fitness fans, don't leave yet. It's your host, Eric Malzone, and I have a quick favor to ask. Actually, 3 favors. So, number 1, if you're a fan of our show, I ask you to do something that takes under 3 minutes. Go to iTunes, please, and subscribe to our show. Please, please, please. It means so much to us. It's so important. And then give us a favorable review. We would really, really appreciate it. And I can't tell you how much it means and helps us out. So I know it takes 2 minutes of your day, and it means a lot to us. So please do that. Number 2, go to our YouTube channel, our Fitness Marketing Alliance, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel there. Number 3, if you like this episode or any of the episodes that we've released, share it on social. That's huge. That's a big deal for us. And we put a lot of work into these episodes, trying to give you great actionable content for the fitness industry. So that would mean a lot. And that's it. So we have some big plans coming up for this show. I'll be talking about that in the next couple episodes, but thank you so much for listening. It means so much. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from everybody. Eric, ERIC at fitnessmarketingalliance.com.